You're listening to Ask the Expert on Sprott Money News.
Well, greetings once again from Sprott Money News and SprottMoney.com. This is your Ask the Expert segment for June 2017. I'm your host, Craig Hemke, and joining us this month is Chris Martenson. Many folks out there know Chris Martenson. He is an author, he's an analyst, and he's the co-founder of the great website peakprosperity.com. It's a pleasure to have Chris join us this month. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, it's a real pleasure to be here with you and all the listeners today.
Chris, before we get started, hey, take a second and tell everybody just a bit about peakprosperity.com and what they'll find there.
Sure. Peak Prosperity, that's the main website where we house such things as the crash course that it really explains where we are and where we're headed. And we've got a great community of people there. We have both a lot of free information and a subscription newsletter service for people who are interested in knowing about what they can personally do, what actions they can and should be taking given the state of the world today.
Again, peakprosperity.com, all one word, peakprosperity.com. Please check it out, everybody that's listening. And again, just a reminder before we get started, these Ask the Expert segments are brought to you by Sprott Money International Storage Program. We store over 1 million ounces and are proud of our perfect audit record. Please visit sprottmoney.com/storage to learn more. Chris, again, these questions have been submitted over the past couple of weeks by Sprott Money customers. They're specific to your expertise. I've got 6 of them for you. So if you're ready, how about we get started?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. The first one deals with, well, really, we have an ongoing financial crisis, probably never really has ended since 2007 and 8, but pertaining to the next, I guess we'll call it the next crisis, will there be wealth generating opportunities through the next crisis, or will it all be about just simple survival?
Well, that really depends on whether you've got the right information at hand. So yes, of course, there are always wealth generating opportunities, but my view is that this next period is not, most people will have the wrong view and they're going to experience it as wealth destruction. It's going to be very hard to avoid that. But if you watch carefully and you know what's happening, it's actually going to be wealth transfer from party A to party B. It's actually already happening. We're seeing it in the 0.1%, getting more and more and more of the real wealth, by which I mean they're transferring their paper wealth into land, into resources, into the actual tangible wealth. So the wealth transfer happens when people don't understand that holding paper wealth, fantasy digits, representations of wealth, claims on wealth is not the same thing as owning the wealth itself.
Is this kind of along the lines of, I guess we've heard Jim Rogers and others talk about transferring some of your dollar-based assets into other hard assets? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely, but hard assets is an easy button that you can hit if you're buying gold and silver, platinum, palladium, things like that. Of course, you can also be buying productive land, timberland, farmland, really good cash-flowing properties, things like that. But again, this is something that we're going to see. A lot of people are going to lose their ownership of or access to those same real assets, and the ownership is going to be transferred.
Fair enough. Okay, the second question, again, submitted by a Sprott Money customer, has to do with, I guess, the current global financial and monetary system. And it just simply is this: will unelected banking entities, such as the IMF and the Bank for International Settlements, will they remain powerful after this next crisis?
We can hope not, but probably they will, because they've stacked the deck. They really have all the pieces lined up for complete ownership of the system. One of the articles that we have running at Peak Prosperity right now is about cryptocurrencies. Hey, we're all excited by Bitcoin, by Ethereum, what they could possibly do. But I think we also need to understand that they've been allowed to run as far as they have because the state actors, including the BIS, et cetera, the Fed has something called the Fed coin that they're imagining. And China, of course, has their own coin they just announced recently and from their central bank. So these digital representations are going to be, I think, the next thing that steps in and will be enforced in some way when, not if, but when we finally have this gigantic fiat currency crisis, which has to happen because That's the only way you can finally get out of a boom brought about by credit expansion is either you stop that junk or you face a collapse of the currency systems involved. Hey, yen, dollar, euro, all exposed in this story. But we should be remembering that the state actors are very powerful and they have no interest in losing that power.
I want to segue that, just a quick kind of follow-up, Chris. So what is your opinion on what we generally call the war on cash, this idea, these trial balloons that are floated, it seems like almost every day now, about the elimination of larger denominated notes, that type of thing. Do you see that as a symptom of this problem too?
Absolutely. That's simply the state, again, wanting to corral individuals, the more the merrier, into their preferred solutions. And their preferred solutions, this is a 10-year, 20-year long trend for anybody who's been watching. The state wants complete insight into and control over your entire life. That's your medical records, your phone records, your financial records, all of those things. And cash represents a blind spot for them. They don't like it. So they're looking to begin to push cash out of favor because they love the power that comes from knowing your entire browser history, everything about you, and of course where all of your money is going. And they will wrap it up in very fancy language to protect the children and eliminate terrorism and all that junk. But it has nothing to do with it. It's just about control and visibility and the ability, if necessary, to, I believe, to cut off access to finances for troublesome individuals.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, third question, Chris, and this is also in the central bank category, so in the last one of these. Do you think that the global central bankers actually have a plan for dealing with this ongoing crisis, or are they just simply reactionary and, plugging their fingers into all the different holes as they pop up, trying to keep things together?
Can I say yes to that? Because it's both. First, they're just reacting to everything, and they're reacting in the same way they have before. Now, look, we're in extremely dangerous bubble territory right now. It surpasses the one we were in 2007 and 8, which surpassed the one we were in 2000. This is a long-running problem, or predicament, I should say, that actually didn't even begin in the mid-90s, which is where we can start charting it, but began in the late 70s, early 80s, when the United States led the world with this really insane idea, which is, hey, let's try growing our debts at twice the rate of our income. Hey, nothing should stop that, right? Well, that broke in 94. It broke again in 2000. It broke again in 2007, and it's going to break again this next time. So that's all reactionary, but you'd have to be an idiot to think that they are not aware of this dynamic and that they don't have a fallback plan for what they're going to do when that all breaks.
Do you have any guesses what do you think that fallback plan is, Chris?
Well, the trends have been pretty clear that they want a global unified government of some kind and currency of some kind. And we know that there are all kinds of plans out there. There's special drawing rights, and the BIS has their own plan. Listen, everybody's got a plan. Of course, as Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So I think the underlying part of this question is, do I personally think that the central bankers will be able to affect these plans when this thing breaks? And the answer is, I don't think so. I know they have the plans. I don't think they're going to make it out of the gate. And the reason is encoded in, look how scared they are to allow even a minor drawdown right now. Even a % or two brings out all the central bankers. We saw a pretty good deconstruction of markets in January of 2016, big head and shoulders on the S&P, emerging markets in disarray, dollar spiking, carry trades unwinding. And then one night in February, it all turned around. And we got onto the next leg of this. And now that we have access to the central bank balance sheets, we can see, oh, that's where they really accelerated, throwing more money into the markets. So we know they're afraid of even minor downturns. I believe that this next downturn, when it comes, will be larger, faster, and more violent than the central bankers can control. The real question is, what's the power anybody has at the bottom of that next trough?
Well, that's a good segue again now to the next question. This will be question number 4 from Sprott Money customers. This has to do specifically with the European Union. What do you think, Chris, is the future of the EU, given Brexit, Frexit, Italy, everything else, but also just the overwhelming amount of debt that the EU has and their immigration issues?
It's a mess, of course, and the euro was destined to fail as a monetary union because it was a monetary union without a fiscal union. And of course, today, people can all see that there's no appetite politically in Europe for that fiscal union, because Germany's going to want to fiscally unite with Italy? Are you crazy? Not a chance. So we have this runaway idea of it was a dumb idea, let's face it, to be able to control money without controlling the fiscal side as well. It just doesn't work. And politically, Europe is very fractured at this point in time. Obviously, the refugee crisis is an enormous one. It's never a question of do you take new immigrants into your land, but it's the pace. And the pace has really been much too rapid to culturally digest. It's been forced down everybody's throats collectively over there by Brussels, a very, very bureaucratic, disconnected organization, if ever there was one. And of course, Europe, the people of Europe have a much, much higher history and threshold for when they come out and really protest. French farmers dump tomatoes and a million people show up in Ibiza Square, whatever. So they have a very robust history of making themselves known when they're unhappy. And I do believe that unhappiness is climbing. And it's got to break at some point, because there's not even a chance politically that Germany and France are going to agree to bail out Italy at this point in time. And Italy is toast fiscally and monetarily.
All right. The fifth question has to do, I guess, with current events, as this was on a lot of folks' minds a couple of weeks ago, and that's probably when this question was submitted. The Trump administration made big news, I guess 2 or 3 weeks ago, with the pulling out of the Paris Accords on climate change. With your scientific background, Chris, this Sprott Money customer just wants to know what your views are on this idea of global warming or even global cooling.
Well, some of it's really straightforward. We know that there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's easy. We know why it's getting there. Hey, we're burning stuff. And we know that when you put more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the partial pressure of CO2 over water forces more of that CO2 into the water. It forms carbonic acid, and we're seeing a very rapid acidification of the oceans, which has lots of effects on things at the bottom of the food chain. Already, oyster farmers are discovering that they can't grow the fry oysters from eggs through the larval stage because their shells aren't forming properly, both in Maine and in Washington State, but we're seeing it all over the globe. So that's a really easy thing to notice, that we are acidifying the oceans very rapidly. My science background says that it's the height of folly to willy-nilly knock out the bottom of a food pyramid without thinking that you're going to cause some unpredictable, unknowable consequences that are going to come from that. So I'm very much of the idea that we are humans having very large impacts. We need to face up to that. The ecological impacts that I track go well beyond just global warming. For instance, we saw just a mysterious collapse of over 40% of the insect population's minimum, up to 70 to 80% across Europe and the United States. You just can't do that without creating enormous difficulties. So we have to square up and face that humans do have impacts. We're at that growth stage of our species. It's time to settle down and say, okay, we're out of it. We can't just leave our rooms messy like teenagers. We have to actually live in this house. We're young adults now. So that's the conversation we need to start having. The politicization of the whole climate change thing and watching various big bank actors come in and want to make tons of money off of carbon trading and all of that. That's just junk. That's absolutely, I think, the wrong direction for all of this to go, is because, listen, people have good reason to distrust how state actors and large banks want to get rich off of this whole idea. That absolutely you can say that's a terrible idea. But the science is increasingly clear on the impacts we're having. And if I just want to make it dead simple, the chemistry behind ocean acidification is linear, it's straightforward, there's no confusion about the models, there's nothing where we have to do complexity modeling theory, it's just simple. So there, what the impacts are, not simple, but we can watch the acidification happen. So I think that there's lots that we need to begin facing up to in the environmental side of this story. No question about it. I'm 54. The changes I've seen in my lifetime are astonishing in the disappearance of species. And if that doesn't punch you in the gut, you got to get outside more.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, the final question kind of turns back to the metals and the miners, specifically the mining shares. And this Sprott Money customer just wants to know what you think of the mining shares and will they remain relevant and probably even more importantly, independent through the next financial crisis. And I think what this person's driving at, do you worry about mine nationalization, that sort of thing?
Well, this is a very complex topic. I pick my miners extremely carefully. Miners isn't like one word to me. Not even the majors and the juniors. It's you have to pick them very carefully. You have to understand that nationalization, of course, is a possibility. And you have to pick through. It's time for fundamental analysis. Get in there. Like I really walked away from miners for a number of years when prices were rising for gold very rapidly and for silver, and yet they weren't spinning out extra free cash flow during what should have been the time when that leverage of the miners should have hit. I think a lot of those miners, but not all of them, have cleaned up their acts, have learned how to become better stewards and managers. They're not willy-nilly diluting every time they have an opportunity. They're not just going out and hitting the debt markets to make cash flows work through. So there are some operators out there that are really good, some less so. It's time for that fundamental analysis. I think they're going to be a great play when we finally can get the boots off the throat of the price of gold and silver that the bullion banks have been exerting for years now.
And I would imagine some of that analysis is what you provide at peakprosperity.com, correct?
We do. We start to dig through all of these things and haven't dug through the miners in a while, though. So if anybody's coming looking for that, you'll find a bare cupboard. But I'm starting to get back in, and now I'm analyzing very deeply the shale oil business.
Well, again, thank you, Chris. I think your site is valuable, and obviously the insights you provide are wide-ranging and again, very insightful. And so we appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for spending a little bit of it here at Sprott Money News and SprottMoney.com.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.
And thanks to everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next month.